So we are on 5.7a. 5.7a is going to go on page 103.
Check the what's it called?
Okay, so when we are doing these, please ask questions. Don't hesitate. I only can help you if you ask for the help. Okay, I am not a mind reader. I wish I was. That would save me a lot of time in life, but I'm not. So please make sure you ask questions, especially if you're confused. Yes. We have been in the fourth 6 weeks for 4 weeks.
Week of the 4th 6 weeks.
This is the 5th week of the 4th 6 weeks. This is the start of the 5th week.
What?
This is a 7 week, 6 weeks. Yes, we have this week and 2 more. Report card grades are due February 18th. All right, so I was gonna, guys, I was gonna have you guys write these notes down yourself, but I changed my mind last minute and I made you a handout. Okay, so in my notes it says box because you're gonna be writing in your own notes in a box. So just follow along. Don't worry that it doesn't say example 1, example 2. Just know that it was a last minute decision to make you the copy of notes. So, all right. So, welcome. Steps to solve. When you have a quadratic problem equation that looks like this, where you only have one term with a variable in it, these are the steps that you're going to follow to solve. Okay. So step 1, you're going to subtract or add your C value. Step 2 is you're going to divide your A value. Step 3 is you're going to take the square root of both sides. Step 4 is where you simplify and write your solution as plus or minus the square root. Okay, so these are going to be the 4 steps that we follow for problems like this. All right, we're going to pause for a second. Yeah, all right, here we go. That's better. Okay, so let's get started. So we're going to do our first example together here. So example 1 for you. I know it says box 2, but on your notes it says example 1. So step 1 is to add or subtract your value away. So in this case, what are we doing? We're adding 9. So we're left with x squared equals 9. Step 2 says to divide if you have to, but our number here is a 1. So is there any division really necessary? No. Step 3, it says to take the square root of both sides. So I'm going to take the square root of this side, take the square root of this side, and I'm left with x equals what? 3. Now, step 4 says when you write it, when you take the square root, you're going to have a plus or minus. That's because 3 can be positive or negative and still be true, right? So you put this symbol plus or minus 3. So your answer is x equals plus or minus 3, which means that it's positive 3 and negative 3. That's what the plus or minus means. Okay. All right. Was that terrible?
No, that's pretty simple.
Is that just 5.78? All of that?
Yeah, you could say so. Anyway.
That's why those are the steps. All right. So when you're writing your answers, you would write it as x. There's 2 separate answers. X equals 3 and x equals negative 3. That's what the plus or minus is telling you. This is the lazy way of writing it.
But both are correct, right?
Yes. But on your homework on the computer, you can't use the plus or minus symbol. So therefore you need to make sure you separate. Okay. All right. So box 3 for me is example 2 for you. Okay. So I'm going to pause, let you try example 2, and then we're going to reconvene. Cool. All right. All right. So step 1, in this situation, we are what? Subtracting. So we subtract the 4 from both sides, and we're left with x squared equals 16. So we added or subtracted. Is there anything to divide? No. Then we're going to do what?
Square root.
Square root both sides. So we square root both sides. And then we're gonna simplify and clean this up. So simplifying this, we get what? X equals plus or minus 4, okay? Which means that we have X equals positive 4 and X equals negative 4. Okay, lazy answer. Single answer. Okay, yes?
Yes.
All right. This is not a caught up, it's a new day, Christian. All right,
Let's do this one by ourselves.
go again.
Let me redeem myself.
Okay, so step 1. There we go. In this case, we are adding 45. And we have 5x squared equals 45. Step 2 says to divide. And I do need to divide because there is a coefficient other than 1. That leaves me with x squared equals 9. Step 3 says to take the square root. And step 4 says to simplify. So it's x equals plus positive or negative 3. Okay, doable? Awesome. Forgot I don't have one. All right. Last one really quick. All right, let's check yourselves. Here we go. So step 1 says to add or subtract. Is there anything to add or subtract? No, we're good. Step 2 says to divide. So I'm dividing both sides by 3. We're left with x squared equals 25. Step 3 says to take the square root. So we take the square root. Step 4 says to simplify. And we get x equals plus or minus 5. So x equals 5. X equals negative 5. Yes? All right, last one. All right, here we go. So step 1, you should have added or subtracted. In this case, you should have added 96. How are we at step 1? Okay, step 2, you should have divided by 3, which gives us x equals 32. X squared equals 32. Step 3, you should have taken the square root. Take the square root. Step 4 is to simplify. Well, when you simplify square root of 32, that is not a perfect square. So just like your do now said, you have to factor 32 itself. 32 can factor down to be what? 2 and 16. And 16 is 4 and 4. Okay, think about this as a couple going on a date. 4 get to go on a date because how many do I have? 2. Square root says I want a group of 2. I have a group of 2 right here, which is 4. And who's the lonely person that stays at home? 2. So my answer is plus or minus 4 square root of 2. Uh-huh. It doesn't matter. So perfect. So Anna asked a good question. What if I start off with 4 and 8? That's cool. 4 and 8. What does 8 break down to? Is there a pair of 4s? If you want to go all the way down to its prime factorization, that is perfectly fine. So if you did 4, 8, then you went to 2, 2, then you went to 2, 4, then you went all the way down to 2, 2. So you have one pair of 2s, they get to go on a date. You have another pair of 2s, they get to go on a date. And then the lonely little 2 has to stay at home. So then you have 4 square root of 2. Okay. However much you need to break it down to is up to you. Okay. All right. Yes.
Do you have to break it down, or is it okay?
You do need to simplify.
Yes.
So you can't just put, square root of 32.
Needs to be simplified. All right. Any other questions?
No, ma'am.
If it can't be simplified, then it can't be simplified. There are odd numbers that can be simplified though. All right, so we're gonna flip it over to 5.7b. Okay, so on 5.7b, we are solving perfect square trinomials, which we talked about last week. And so we're going to be working with them. So last week we discussed that a perfect square trinomial means that your A term and your B term are perfect squares, okay? And then when you do that, all you're doing is taking the square root of this term and the square root of that term to find the factored form, okay? So steps that we're gonna go through is check for GCF. We're gonna factor using perfect square. We're gonna rewrite the factored form. We're going to take the square root of both sides. We're going to add or subtract. Then we're going to divide and simplify. Sounds like a lot, so it's better to just see it all in action. All right, so step one is GCF. So I check to see if there's a GCF, and the answer is no. Because I have 1, 12, and 36. Is there a GCF between those three terms? Okay, step two is to check that you can factor it as a perfect trinomial. So checking to see if it's a perfect trinomial means looking at your A term and your C term. Is 1x squared a perfect trinomial, perfect square? Yes, because x times x is x squared. Agreed? Is 36 a perfect square? Yes, that's because 6 times 6 makes 36. So therefore, my perfect square trinomial here is x plus 6 squared is what this factors out to be. That's because 6 squared is 36 and 6 plus 6 is 12. Agreed? Okay. Equals 25. Okay, that's all step 3 is telling you to do, is to set it equal to 25. How do we feel? All right, step 4 says you're going to take the square root. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. This is going to eliminate the square, and I'm left with x plus 6 equals plus or minus 5. Because the square root of 25 is positive 5 and negative 5. Agreed? Step 5 is to add or subtract to get x by itself. In this case, what am I doing? I'm subtracting 6 from both sides. That's going to leave me with x equals negative 6 plus or minus 5. Notice how it's written. Step 6 is to divide. Is there anything to divide? Is there anything to divide? No. So it's divide and simplify. When you're simplifying this, this means that you have 2 problems happening here. You have negative 6 plus 5, and you have negative 6 minus 5. That's what that plus or minus is telling you to do. So negative 6 plus 5 equals negative 1. That's my first answer. Negative 6 minus 5 equals negative 11, and that's my second answer.
And that's the final answer.
That's why they're boxed. I didn't know fish were boxed, but okay. Sure.
It's the same.
No, it's not.
240. Yeah.
I'm keeping that.
I agree.
All right. So let's try it again. So step 1 is always check for your GCF. And in this case, again, we're lucky. There's no GCF. Step 2 is to check that you can factor it as a perfect square. That means you're checking A term and C term. Is this a perfect square? Yes. Is this a perfect square? Yes. Yes.
What makes them perfect?
It's the same number or variable times itself. X times X, 3 times 3. Okay, so making sure that it works for the middle. X times 3 is 3x, and if I double it, do I get 6x? Yes, so my factor is x plus 3 squared equals, and this is step 3, 49 over 4. The middle? If it doesn't equal the middle, then you can't use this way of solving. Mhm. All right, so step 4 is to take the square root. Square root. When you're taking the square root of a fraction, you're taking the square root of the numerator and the denominator. So we get x plus 3 equals plus or minus 7 over 2. Because the square root of 49 is 7, the square root of 4 is 2. Step 5 is to add or subtract. What am I doing to get x by itself? I'm subtracting 3 from both sides. So x equals -3 plus or minus 3/2. Is it okay if I write that? $3.5. Because 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. And then step 6 is to divide and simplify. Well, I don't need to divide, so I just need to simplify. This means I have -3 plus 3.5. That's not a 5. And I have -3 minus 3.5. What are my two answers? Perfect. I honestly do, if it's an exact fraction, an exact decimal, I do not care. Isn't that 13/2? All right, I would like for you to attempt box 4 on your own, and we'll check it before we move on tomorrow. Okay? All right.